All right, it's working now. Welcome to the podcast, Nathan. I appreciate your patience.
Oh, not a problem. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you reached out to me on Facebook, and you knew someone that I actually had on already, Patrick Johnson. And then when I saw the link that you sent me to your recent project, that is it? It's not released yet, is it? If I recall
It's
correctly.
we're trying to get it onto a streaming service, but we've shown it publicly three times.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not officially released yet, so I'll frame my questions related to that accordingly. Yeah, you know Patrick Johnson, and that's how you actually came to be familiar with me.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I've gotten a number of DMs just because of Patrick's episode, which is nice. Uh, your film that hasn't been released yet is called Reckless Mercy. You've been involved in filmmaking for a number of years now, but you had a gap there, if I recall correctly, of like 17 years.
Oh
Which,
yeah.
yeah, we can get into that in a second. But just go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and how you got into filmmaking at all.
Yeah. My name's Nathan Weidner. I started really early on. I had an older sister that went into television. She went to a career center, studied radio and TV, and then she got a job at a station in Newark, Ohio. And at first, she was just the person that changed the videotapes out. Back in the day when I don't know if they still use tapes or not. I doubt they do. But those big 3.5 quarter-inch tapes, she would change those out to do promos. And she did the midnight to 8 shift, 8 in the morning shift. And so sometimes she would let like me or my brother come out and spend the night with her and work the room. I mean, we didn't touch anything, obviously, but it was
What year was
just
this?
like 1982, 83.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was in middle school, or early high school at the time, and I was just really enamored with all the lights, all the buttons, and
Mm-hmm.
everything because I was a huge Star Trek fan, and it felt to me like she was like working the Enterprise bridge, and that was the first thing that really even drew me to it. It's like, wow, if I work this job, I could push all these buttons. This would be a lot of fun. And so I entered the same career center that she did when I was in my junior year of high school, 1987, 86, end of 86. And so I did the same program as she did. And so I learned how to do radio and television broadcasting. But we, at the end of each year, we were asked to do a final project. And I had written this horror story for a creative writing class at my high school. And so I decided I would actually shoot that as a short film. It was about 37 minutes long. And I really
Oh,
enjoyed
it's a
that.
beefy short film.
Yeah, it was called The Coaxial Killer. It was really largely inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street because I was really hung up on that at the time. And it's about a guy gets zapped into the cable TV system. He busts through TVs and kills people and goes back in and just travels through cable wires.
Mm.
And then, so at the end of my senior year, I wrote a sequel to it, Live Wire: The Return of the Coaxial Killer. The killer came back as they always do, even after they die. And by that time, I realized I'm enjoying film a whole lot more than television. So I actually I entered Ohio State University into their cinema program that they had at the time. But then they started phasing it out in the early 90s. So I was actually right in the middle of the program when they decided that they weren't going to carry that major any longer. But that coincided at the same time that I was feeling a call to go into ministry. So I actually changed my major to French and decided I was going to be a foreign missionary and work towards that for like the next decade. And so I didn't really do anything in film for a while. I met my wife in 1997, actually in France. She was from America, but she just happened to be there at the same time. And we got married the next year and had a daughter who had severe disabilities. And because of her disabilities, we frequented the Cleveland Clinic quite a bit, and they advised us not to take her out of the United States based on her health
Can I
concerns.
ask about the nature of her disabilities?
Yeah, well, they misdiagnosed her initially. They thought she had something called a mitochondrial disorder called Lee's syndrome, which had a very low survival rate. But many years later, we realized that they had misdiagnosed her. It was cerebral palsy, and
Mm.
what they because they found out later that my wife had a blood clotting disorder. She wound up with a blood clot in her lung, and they said women who have that oftentimes actually miscarry a lot or sometimes it'll cause a stroke. The baby will have a stroke even before they're born, and they believe that that's actually what happened. So she had cerebral palsy, and so we were left stateside. We weren't going to leave the country. So I had a French degree and a passion for film, and I didn't quite know what to do with all that. So I did find a job teaching at a private high school, teaching French. And while I was doing that, a buddy of mine and I got together and wrote a script, and we shot it. It took a couple years because we could only do it on the weekends on our free time, called Parchigona. We got that done in 2002, and I showed it at the school that I was teaching at, and they said, "Hey, that's really cool. You ought to teach our kids how to do this." So I wound up teaching video production along with French, and that's how I became like a dual teacher. It's kind of an odd combination of
in high school
classes. Yeah, in high school. Yeah.
Is that what you still teach?
Well, I don't still teach both currently. Actually, this year is the first time in a while that I'm only teaching French, because we lost our other French teacher, and they never replaced her. So this is the first year I've not taught video in like 8 years. But it looks like I might be getting it back next year, because they're trying to get more electives back onto the schedule.
There was a third college, if I recall correctly, that you went to. Is that right?
I went to Ohio State University, then I went to the Free Will Baptist Bible College in '95, and then I went to Ashland University to actually get my education credentials, because I only had a degree in French. And they'll let you in a private school, you're allowed to teach it, even if you don't have the education degree. In public school, they let you in as long as you, within 4 years' time, hit certain credentials. And so I got my master's in education so that I could get my permanent teaching license.
I see. Okay. And at what point, because for your films that you do, you recruit a lot of college filmmakers. But normally, people who recruit college filmmakers are generally professors within the university that has that film program itself. So how did you get connected with student filmmakers at the college level, being a high school teacher that's teaching French?
Well, it was, I just had the good fortune of having a number of students from my own high school who actually wound up in film school. But the odd thing is, a lot of them never took any of my classes. I never had them before. I'd been trying to shoot this film for 12 years. I'd written it in 2009.
Reckless Mercy?
No, A Story for Winter.
A Story for Winter, okay.
A Story for Winter. So that's I wrote it in 2009, and just, I was trying to do it, I was trying to get like investors and get hundreds of thousands of dollars and really do it, really top notch. And it just, nothing was ever working out. And after COVID hit, I got COVID in late 2020, and I just turned 50 that year too. And I was like, my mortality started like weighing really heavily upon me. It's like, I've spent all this time, and it's like, and I felt like, near brush of death there. It was pretty rough. And I long hauled it, actually. I still have asthma to this day.
You got COVID, and that's what what came from it?
Yeah, I have to carry an inhaler with me everywhere. But so it really started weighing on me. I'm like, something, this is do or die. I need to, do this film. And I happened to have a student who did a music video. And when he turned it in, I was really impressed with the quality of what he had done. And I knew he hadn't borrowed the school's cameras. And so I said, well, what did you shoot that on? And he said his iPhone. And I'm like, well, something, if you can get your iPhone to kick something like that out, then, I'm just going to shoot this thing on the iPhone. And so we had a really good student who had done a lot of theater. And I felt that he would be a good lead for this film. And so just one thing led to another. By 2021, we set a production date, and I just whipped out my iPhone 12, and we shot it all on that, and got that done at the end of the summer. And then I wanted to, every time I would finish a project over the years, I always wanted to like do the next film. It's like, yeah, we got this done, now let's do the next one. But like, there'd be years between them. Parchigona ended in 2002, started shooting, in other words, in 2004, but it didn't get done until 2009 because of one thing. That's a long story. I'm not going to get into that. But it's just, the footage just sat there gathering dust for years. And I finally edited it into something in 2009. And then of course in 2009, then I'm like, now let's do A Story for Winter. And then we're talking 12 years. So but you always like ride that high after you finish something. And so I wanted to do another film, and actually all the pieces came together because the student that had gone on to, who had starred in that first film that I shot on the iPhone, introduced me to a friend of his that was like an audio recording school, then introduced me to a girl who had graduated in the same class.
And what year was this?
2021.
Okay, so this was
Yeah.
recent. Yeah.
Yeah. They had both, and I remember these kids were class of 21. And this girl was in film school in Alabama. And I'm like, how did all these kids wind up going to film school and that they never took my video class while they were in high school?
You feel a little
Like,
betrayed.
but it's like somehow they just kind of skirted through. And I was like, let's build a team of you guys. I said, you're coming back home from school next summer. And so I had planned on actually shooting the film myself and just using them as crew. But it started snowballing a little bit because the guy who had starred in the first film, he was going to be starring in the next film as well. And he said, hey, could I help you produce this? I don't even know what that means, but I'd like to learn how to do that. I was like, well, okay, but you're going to have to like pull meetings with me. And so we did, like every Monday we Zoomed because he was in New York City at the time. And he set up appointments with things and he did a lot of the groundwork for the film. And then he was asking me, hey, when we get done with the shots, do you mind if I look at them again to see how I've done? I'm like, you're kind of thinking like the director in many ways. And I was like, how would you feel about actually directing the film too? And I was just kind of just slowly easing myself out of the main ball of wax there. And it was a little nerve wracking. So, because when we started shooting, I'm there on set, I'm kind of hovering, and I realized, man, these kids know what they're doing. And I just really gave them space to start doing it. So I didn't go into this necessarily thinking that I was going to just be letting them like run the set, but I realized that if you find the right students, you can do that, and I just acted in the producing role and just let them make the film.
This was for a script that you wrote, correct?
Yeah. Well, I co-wrote it with them. This was The Name of the Sun, and I had written the first 30 pages of it. And I'm known for being like a Hallmark movie sort of guy, like, and I hope, and I tell people, I'm like, I'll take that as a compliment as long as you don't mean that I'm formulaic and you know who's going to be with who at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So this was about a man that's lost in the wilderness. This was completely outside of my wheelhouse. I'd never done anything like this. So I got him in the first 30 pages onto an airplane that was going down over Montana, and he lands, and it's like, I don't know what to do with this guy. So I brought two of the students that were working on the project together, and we hashed out an outline, and then we all just broke off and wrote a number of pages each. And so we shared that with each other.
Because you co-wrote it with them, what was the process for that like in terms of the back and forth nature about how you go about the narrative of the story?
It was, what it is, we decided that he would be there for 6 days. And certain things were going to happen on each of those days, and we mapped that out. And so I basically said, hey, you write day 1 and day 2, and I'll write day 3 and day 4, and you write day 5 and day 6. And then when we got them all together, I just went over it like a second draft to try to bring a cohesiveness to the narrative, or the way that the character spoke, because there's only one character in really most of the film. He's just lost by himself. So I did the second draft of that just to kind of polish it up and make sure it had some cohesiveness to it.
Okay. Well, yeah, he approached, well, no, you said that actually that, you suggested to him that potentially he direct. I got that's correct, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Was there a particular reason why, or something that you saw in him that made you think that, he's capable of doing this?
Wow. I don't know. It was a gut feeling.
It was a gut feeling?
I mean, it was probably very risky to do it, but there was just something inside of me. I mean, he was very serious about this. He was in New York City at Pace University studying to be an actor and everything, but he wanted to learn the process. And and I tell you what, too, working with him as a producer, I think really eased my mind in the area. And I understand directing is a whole different ball of wax. But he was being very responsible with what I was giving him to do as a producer. And since he was going to be the only actor on screen, he's basically directing himself. I was like, I felt comfortable with him in particular, just turning him loose and letting him do it.
Okay, well, what was the premise behind that story? You know, because if he's directing as well as acting, and you felt comfortable letting him on, what about the story? Did you feel what was appropriate for that particular method?
Um, because well, he'd done stage for years and years, and again, because it was kind of like a one man show, I felt like he was very he's very self critical. He was very I felt like turning him loose on the performance without me necessarily telling him what to do. It would allow him to evolve as an actor simultaneously as a director. And again, I know that's awfully risky to
Hmm.
turn him loose, but he did such a good job on the previous film. He needed very little direction, even from me. I kind of hedged him in amongst just a lot of people I knew who just played people who were like themselves. You know what I mean? I didn't really have a lot of really many professional actors on that set at all. They were just like family members and friends and people I knew. And he was the most professionally trained person on that set. And I probably maybe recall only twice during the entire shooting of A Story for Winter
Hmm.
that I ever had to tell him, try it this way. He just knocked it out. He was really good at what he was doing. So I had a lot of faith in him as an actor, and I felt like this would help him grow as a director too, just controlling how he gave that performance on screen.
Was there anything from that project though, in terms of because you were delegating more to other people in the production? What aspects of that experience did you take and put into the next production in terms of the lessons that you learned from that?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I mean, the next production was something I did on my own. But if we're talking about Reckless Mercy, actually was the next one I did with students.
Okay.
And what I took from that, to tell you the truth, honestly, it was the learning to let go. Like I said, it was on the Name of the Sun. It was a process of kind of being there and hovering, and only gradually just kind of letting it loose. I feel that um, once we started shooting Reckless Mercy, I was really giving that leeway very early on. I felt very comfortable with the people that I put together on that one. Now, the kid who directed that, I call him a kid. He's in his early 20s.
Everyone's a
Not
kid
much,
once you're
not much
older.
older than you, but he was the student who had shot the music video in my class that had got me to use my iPhone. So I'd known him for quite a few years. I'd worked with him before, so there was a sense of familiarity there too. There was already a trust that had been built, and I'd been seeing stuff he'd been doing in college over the years that he was at Ohio University. So I think it was just a little easier to do that. I feel that maybe down the line, once I've kind of used up the people I know, and I'm reaching out to unknowns, there might be a level of you know a little bit of hovering again, just because
Yeah.
because I don't know how you're going to deal with the set necessarily. Um, but one of- I honestly feel that one of the things I've really grown to understand about myself and feel comfortable with is just the producing side of things. Um, I've always been the one man band, for so many years. Most of
As
the
it
stuff.
goes in indie filmmaking, you wear a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
hats.
sometimes you're standing behind the camera holding the boom pole, saying action, and but with this, by letting it go and that freeing me up to actually be able to find these locations and set things up for them, I found it's very comfortable producing, and I never really thought of that as being something I would enjoy so much, have being so hands off. I mean, overall being in control and responsible, and all the blame falling on me if it doesn't work, but
Hmm.
still, but just I learned to really lean into that role and enjoy it a whole lot more. I
Okay.
never realized I would enjoy that.
Did you find that there was a surprising amount of creativity that actually goes into the role of producing as opposed to like more like, the acting or the writing or the directing?
Um,
Yes and no?
yeah, yeah, yes and no, and I feel like I mean, again, because I've been very much a part of the writing still. Like the Reckless Mercy, I did write the script for it and everything, and I've learned that I guess I don't know how much that happens in the cinema world. I know it happened a lot in the television world,
Mm.
um, from reading, again, big Star Trek fan. There's this series, a couple books out there called Star Trek: The First 50 Years, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And I've listened to that on Audible numerous times. And just listening, because most of the people who work on that show, the people who produced the show, were also the writers. And I didn't realize how much that went hand in hand on TV. And I'm like, but it started making sense to me the more I was listening to this. I'm like, oh yeah, you know, because that's what we did with Reckless Mercy. You know, I wrote it and then produced it and just made sure that I had the right people in place that I could trust to make it work. And it's not to say that I never intervened at any time. There's 2 times on this particular set where I had to tell the DP, I want you to do a certain thing. He was doing this moving shot, and it was very shaky no matter how he did it. And I was just really worried that if he didn't get a static shot as a backup, that we're going to be in trouble possibly in the editing. So I made sure he at least did a static shot as well. You know, but it's very rare that I ever had to step in and ever.
What are some of the other examples of like you having to step in and make an authoritative change to a crew's creativity?
Again, it was, well, there was a shot I know where something was in the background. So it's like a 2 shot with something in the background. And then they were framing it again where it's just the one person in this frame, and the thing was in the background, and then it was going to be the other guy, and the thing's going to to me, it was going to look like those old Panavision films that they formatted for old TVs where they were just, it was going to feel weird and disjointed. And I had to insist, it's like, you can't have that thing in the background showing up in the close-ups, or else it's just going to feel very disorienting. And I had to kind of like draw it out a little bit to explain what I was talking about, because I don't think anybody this generation knows what that's like to watch those old movies where they were, because we're used to watching things in letterbox now. That those old 4x3 TV screens back in the day when we watched, like Ben-Hur and stuff like that, it was always very odd. And you could tell it's like, that's just the same image. They just moved the camera down that way. So just to avoid that.
You can, and films like It's a Wonderful Life and older movies like that, you can kind of see it's like they just barely moved the camera in the set and then just reshot the scene and then cut it up accordingly.
Which is why too, like, I mean, they've talked about the wonders of, like, if you shoot things in 4K and you render it down to 1080p, it's like you could just do the one shot, right? And then you can just zoom in and get your close-ups. I'm like, yeah, but it's like it's still the same angle. It's just there's nothing. It doesn't change enough. To me, to be able to actually use it that way.
When did you start your company, Praus Media?
Well, that has been. It technically started as widescreen back in 1999.
Okay.
And it went through like 5 years. We ran it as a nonprofit, and nothing else was happening with it, and so we just kind of let it die. I picked it back up again as a nonprofit in like 2012. And then, after 5 years, you always have to like re-register with the state of Ohio, but nothing was happening. So I just kind of let it expire again. So I filed for it again in 2021. So really, within our modern era as operating, it's been around for about 4 years now.
Okay, so basically since COVID, more or less.
Yeah.
What prompted you to continue? Because in the last few years, this would be since COVID. Reckless Mercy would be your 4th feature that you've done. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so now you're cranking it out. What gave you that extra push? Because you had that 17-year gap, and we can get into that a little bit between media and getting into filmmaking as a teacher, and then starting to do that. What gave you that extra push to actually pursue creativity a little bit more seriously?
Well, I feel that technology, just the change in technology, has made it a lot more simple. It's a lot more affordable to be able to do it. And it's not that like when we did Parchigona, we shot that on 8mm videotape. And when we did In Other Words, we shot that on mini DV. Again, we're still dealing with videotape. We had a much better camera. It was the Canon XL2 that we shot that on, but still, it's SD, 480p, and it's just, I don't know. And I look back on it now, and it's like, it's just kind of cringy to have to, like, because when you try to stretch it to watch it on a 4K TV, it's like, it looks so awful. But I feel like the technology making it more readily available, has encouraged me to like I have more of an opportunity to do it. Two, again, it was just this idea that, you know, I'm life is short, and I hit 50. I feel like the switch went off when I hit 50. You know, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I've wanted to do this more. I've not been able to, and I always did have, like I said, every time I finished a film, I was always ready to do the next one, but the opportunity was never there. And I was pleasantly surprised when we finished A Story for Winter, that when I got that gumption again, we made it happen. And we didn't just make it happen. I mean, we did things like I would say, we're going to shoot this in Montana. And like people would ask, well, how are you going to shoot that in Montana? I'm like, I don't know. We're just going to do it, and we found a way to do it, and it worked, and it came together. I'm like, okay, it's like, now let's do another one. It's like, and I found that I was able to keep the momentum going. I always wanted to do another one after I
Mm.
finished a film. And because I successfully completed a second one, then I'm like, let's do a third. Let's do, it just,
Do
and
you
I'll
work with
keep
the
doing
same
it.
people more often than not?
You mean like crew wise or like
Yeah,
acting
crew
wise?
wise.
Not well. What we do, we've really set a rule, because again, Praus Media, it's actually a nonprofit organization, and our purpose is to offer college age and some high school as well, opportunities to work on their first features in certain capacities. Once they've done a job, they're not allowed to repeat that job ever. They can't, like if they directed one of our films, they can't come back and direct another one,
Why is that?
because I want to I want to share the love. I want
Ah,
someone else
okay.
to have the opportunity to do it. So, but like last year's DP, we're giving him the opportunity to direct this year. So there is some,
But he's in a different role now.
it's a different role, yeah. And then at some point they graduate out of the program. They're allowed to do it within up until a year after graduation from film school, and then after that, because we do want to focus on college students.
Okay. How are the logistics of like doing a nonprofit or a work of art in the form of a nonprofit harder than you think than doing it for profit? Because
Probably more
it's
so.
a very it's a different structured, it's a different format. You give other people the an opportunity to actually get their feet off the ground, and so there's in the film world that's it's actually kind of like one of those missing, because you give people the opportunity, you give people that it, it's such a there's like 3 or 4 questions. My ADHD is not helping me. um, because it's nonprofit, then you give people the opportunity to get their first feature under their belt and get that work. What types of problems have you had to overcome when it came to the structure of how the architecture of that format actually comes to fruition?
It's more so in the operation. More so in the business operation side of it, and it's how you raise money and from whom you get the money. I think that's what, in many ways, I feel like it makes it easier possibly to get the money. In some ways, it actually restricts you. But on set, I mean, I don't feel like it's really impacted the way that we produce, by any means. I did, like I said, I did Chasing Glamour. That was a film I did on my own. I actually have an LLC as well called Outside Hollywood Movies, and I established that because I can't just make my own stuff through Praus. It doesn't fit the mission statement of the organization. But I still want to
Right.
be able to grow as an artist myself. So, but the set of Chasing Glamour was no different than like working with the students on Praus. But the money, is this idea that because we're offering opportunities and we can. I hate that. I hate this whole idea of marketing. I'm saying, like,
Mm.
and we're selling the idea that you're helping students. But I feel like that is the motivation for people to donate money. Like we raised $17,000 to do The Name of the Sun, and that was all through private donation. We didn't get that from any sort of investors. These were just individuals doing it because they wanted to be a part and help out and for these students to be able to create something and learn
Mhm.
from it. But it does cut you off from other funding sources because I've learned that because I'm working with students, a lot of the arts grants aren't open because they want you working with professionals. Um, So
Hmm.
yeah,
I
I
didn't know
know.
that.
I learned that the hard way by applying and being turned down. It's like, well, yeah, but these are just students. We don't work with education. I'm like, oh,
Are you
okay.
able to get school grants and stuff like that for these types of projects?
I I probably need to poke my nose out there a whole lot more and find out what else is out there. I mean, there's so many avenues for it, but I was trying to get the more
Right.
conventional local routes, and it just it's kind of coming up empty. So we've really basically just done it through private donation for the most part.
What has been the most surprising thing when it comes to working with students? Because if they don't have a lot of work under their belt, and that's the goal of your nonprofit, to be able to get artists off the ground and get their feet up and going. What's the most surprising thing when it came to working with people who don't have a lot under their belt? What is it like? Maybe it's the ambition, and they're giving it their all because this is their first opportunity and it's a big deal. Just tell me about that.
Oh yeah, I mean they've taken it is a different ball of wax. They take it very seriously. They realize the opportunity that they've been given. At least again, I've only done this twice now officially. Um, Both sets of crew members have just dove into the deep end of the pool and just have given their all. I've not really had any problems with them at all,
Okay.
and yeah,
I mean, that's fortunate, especially in the indie world where you can actually run into those people who kind of they think they're the shit, and they get their role in sort of a sense of validation,
mhm.
and they sometimes you have to wait and see whether or not they're going to take it seriously because of they're taking the project seriously for the project's sake or because they take themselves way too seriously, and you don't always know what sort of person you actually hired or you brought on until you start working with them.
Yeah. I will say this from having done, like I said, Chasing Glamour as my own and doing that like it's like an actual production company, an LLC, as opposed to doing the nonprofit films. Um, we set a date. We're going to start shooting like in late May or early June. For these nonprofits, and we'll be wrapped up by the end of July. Boom, boom, boom. We hit the schedule. We have to move a few dates here and there if something comes up, somebody goes on vacation. But for the most part, they stick to the schedule. We get it done, and boom, it's done. The LLC experience was very different because we started shooting that in November, and I had planned on getting that done by the end of January, and it was the next June
We
that we got it done. It was just one thing after another.
How
And
do
I
you
remember,
manage your time when you have so many things going on?
oh, um, I just live for it. I joke because like anytime I get together with people I haven't seen in a while, and everyone's wanting to talk about blah blah blah, this, that, and the other thing. I have only one thing I know how to talk about, and that's the film world, or like these films, because it's all I'm doing. And I said I feel like I jokingly said I feel like the corn farmer who all he ever does is stand out in the corn and tell everybody about his corn, you know. Uh, because it's
Right.
like, what else is, what, because if people ask me what's new, and I'm like, I wish there was something newer than just these movies, because I don't want you to think, I don't want you to get tired of hearing about it, but it's like, it's really all I do. That, and I'm a grandpa. I'll tell you
Mm.
all about my grandson too, and the stuff that we do together, but it's either my grandson or it's the films.
What's your family's relationship to your creative pursuits? And how do they do? Are they big supporters of it? And have there been conflict because of it? I mean, because generally, creatives, when we get involved with something, our entire existence and our soul is basically wrapped up into it.
Yeah.
How has your family taken to your creative pursuits?
They are 100% behind it. Now, you have to understand, I am from a very creative family. I'm from the very early age. So, we were raised in church, and my mom and dad got involved in puppet ministry really early on in children's church. And then as we all started growing up, I'm one of five kids. I'm the baby of the family. Everybody started going behind the puppet stage and started doing puppetry work. Uh, and then I just kind of, I just fell into that, because it was what everybody in the family was doing. We started traveling with it. And then
You
as people
traveled
got
with a
older,
puppet show?
yeah, we did. Well, we did like it's almost like vacation Bible schools, but like we would do entire productions with singing and puppets and storytelling, and and we traveled with it. So I always say that we were like the Columbus version of the Osmond family. We're just like going to pack up in a big van and travel all over the place. And every time somebody married into the family, they took on a role too. They either started singing with us, or if they didn't know how to sing, they could lug the boxes or whatever. So we were always, and then we formed a family singing group. And so I sang with them until about just after graduation. So we were always performing. We were very much a performing family. So when I got into high school and I did my murder films, my slasher films, everybody in my family, were in those films. I killed most of the members of my family in those 2 years on screen. And
Yeah.
so every time I did a film, they were 100% behind me. I remember when we started doing Parchigona, I was living in Nashville at the time, and my dad would drive. He would like build something for my set, and he would drive it down on a U-Haul from Columbus, and everything. So yeah, they've been hugely supportive.
Do you have a big family?
It's
you're one of 5 kids. But what about your extended family? How does that family dynamic? Because if your core family is very creative, generally speaking, you have some interest and help that comes in from at least the outside of the family when you're not actually dealing with external world, like the student filmmakers and other people that do things professionally. When your family is being creative and then you start doing your own thing, what's the response from your extended family?
I mean, they're excited. I mean, they like anytime we hold the premiere, they always come. They're always like very much supportive. They've been financially supportive of it. They help out with it. I'll usually, I still pull them in here and there in bit parts. I mean, they used to be the main players in my early stuff, but they're not professional actors, and they know that. So I mean, I did use a number of them on Story for Winter because again, we were just getting back off the ground again, but they're just they're there on the sidelines, and they're always excited to see the next film. And like it's even the extended family. Like I've had nephews and nieces involved in it, and I remember at one point when I was shooting Parchigona, I would go out of state with my nephew, and he'd run boom pole for me and everything. So it's I still have a nephew that actually comes and runs boom pole for me on the more recent projects too. When we did Chasing Glamour, he was with me the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about because your recent one that I want to get into is Reckless Mercy. And I saw a bit of it. It deals with a very serious topic. It's quite it's a very emotional script because it deals with a number of people, including the main character, who have to deal with murder in some way. The main character, his wife was killed in an accident, and he's an alcoholic. He's dealing with it, but he also runs a help group. Essentially, there's a specific term for it. I'm not sure exactly what it is. What was the inspiration behind that script? Because it's generally that when there's a very serious topic like that, there is an inciting event for the artist that really inspires that.
Okay. All right. Well, brace yourself.
Hold on. Do I need to go get my alcohol? Do we need to become alcoholics for this, or?
Let me take you back in time. Let me take you back because the original version of the script actually started being written in like 1989, 1990. So this is something that has stayed in a drawer for like I don't know for how long. And it was originally an homage to a friend that I had who kind of like taught me to go out and take more risks. We used to go on bike rides like 30, 60 miles at a time, go out of city, stay at high bike hostels and stuff. And then it was supposed to just be an homage to our friendship. And so I just created these characters, a psychologist and a murderer. Not that either of us really embodied that, but I was just kind of like just using that as the impetus for it. And I got like maybe 30 pages into that, and like written on notebook paper, and it just sat there in a drawer for a long time. Fast forward to the year 2009. And so what happened was at this point, I got divorced in 2003. I have 3 kids. Again, my oldest one was the one with the cerebral palsy. They were living in South Carolina, and my ex-wife was dating a new man, and he was a fireman. He was an EMT, And so I went down there for one of the kids' birthday parties, met him, and I was like, yeah, he seems like a nice guy. And, he seemed like he was really good around the kids. And so that was like around like April of '09. July of '09, he wound up shaking my daughter with cerebral palsy to death. We don't, and again, to this day, I don't
To
really
death?
understand. To death. Yeah.
Literally?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so it came out of left field. At first, we knew that she was seizing. I went down to South Carolina to be there, and within 2 days, they declared her brain dead and took her off life support. And then within about a day after that, suddenly the police were at my ex-wife's door, because we're still getting there down there, getting prepared for the funeral, and the police show up, and suddenly it's like, oh, something happened, and I don't know how it came out or how they learned that something had happened, but he had basically confessed to having. Well, he lied about what he had done initially, but it essentially had shaken her to death. So I took custody of my other two kids at that point, and that's a long story too. But so it was, and we went through the trial was like a year later. It takes a long time for something like that to go to trial. That was
Sure.
October of 2010, and it was like shortly after that. And of course, I'm just like, it's hating this man, just hating him. This song hit the radio by an artist named J.J. Heller called "What Love Really Means," and the last verse of the song is talking about a man in a jail cell regretting what he's done and him crying out to God. And it's like, and it broke my heart for him, in a very surprising way, because again, that did not come very naturally, but it was like in my mind.
That's understandable, though.
I'm a man of faith. I honestly believe that my daughter, who couldn't walk or talk or eat, she was tube fed and everything, down here on earth, was, that she's in heaven now and is free of all that. And it's like, I felt like, the tragedy of her life, the tragedy of her story was over, but there's only one tragedy left in this world, and that is the fact that there's a man who's probably regretting what he's done, and he's sitting in a cell somewhere, and he's completely separated from everybody he loves. And I said, the moment I knew that I could feel sorry for him was the moment I knew that I could potentially forgive him. So you were watching the beginning of that film, that therapy session.
Mm-hmm.
That actually happened. That I just basically, I didn't have names of anybody, but I decided I wanted to go to a group therapy session for people who were dealing with murder. And it just happened to be the first time I show up that they bring in they had brought in these guest students, college students who were forensic, studying criminology. And they wanted to study the effect of crime on the victims' families. And so they were allowed to ask us questions at the end. And one of them did ask us, I said, anybody considered forgiveness as a means of healing? And the room kind of erupted, and not like loud, like yelling, but it was very bitter, very like, you could never forgive.
They were kind of offended by that, yeah.
Yeah, and like, by that point, I was already halfway there, and so to me, it was just like, oh my gosh, there's so much hurt in this room, and I came here I didn't feel like the group was going to be very beneficial to me. And I felt bad because, again, some of these people don't even know who killed their loved one. Like, I know who the man is and he's in jail for it. Right. And some of these people, they've never found the killer and stuff. So I get that. There's just a plethora of experience in that room. But I decided not to go back to that. So if you're watching that scene, Patrick Johnston is in that scene.
It definitely felt like the subtext, the context of that movie came from somewhere very real. So that's why I was very curious about it, because it was oddly specific in the way that it approached the subject, you know. And God, that is a tragedy, dude. Man. Well, you did tell me to brace myself, so I guess I just didn't do a good job of it, frankly.
Well, let me finish this, because
go ahead. Go ahead.
This isn't even done.
No.
But just for the sake of that scene, Patrick plays me. I remember when you were talking to him, when you were interviewing him on there. You were asking him about, like, if he portrayed people who, like real people or whatever. And he was portraying me. He was actually portraying me in that film. Me in my physical form. Because basically at the beginning he says, my wife's boyfriend killed our 10-year-old daughter Danielle. My daughter's name was Mia Dennell. So I kind of just used some loose connections to them, and I called him Ethan because it's a derivative of Nathan, which is my name. So Patrick basically and I told him, and he knew from the very beginning that he was going to be taking me on in this film and showing kind of like that process of forgiveness. So what happened is in 2015, I get a letter from Victim Services from South Carolina, and they said he wants to write you a letter, but we won't let him do that unless you give us permission to let him send that letter. And I said, no, let him send it. And so he did send the letter, and he did ask me to forgive him for what he had done. And by that time, we're talking like 5 years later, and it's like I was ready. I had already worked through most of that process, and I forgave him. I wrote him back, and so it's interesting though. It's not as easy as obviously it's like I feel like sometimes I've made it sound easy, but I think even I've convinced myself possibly at times that it was easy until we started shooting the film. And writing the script, I've told people, was very therapeutic to me to get it on paper like that. But once the kids started shooting it and I was standing on set, it wasn't even so much Ethan's character. There's another character in the film, Shannon, whose sister was murdered. The stuff that comes out of her mouth are things that I have felt and thought. So she embodies my emotion, and he kind of just embodies my situation. And there were days when I was on set listening to her say these things, and it just gutted me. It was like, oh man, it's like I'm living this again. It was really rough. So that was it was quite a hard process getting through the summer, but we made it, and I'm glad we did. I really felt like it was, like we live through things in life. They say to write what you know, and it's like, and I understand that this, and hopefully most people don't ever have to live through something like this. But I felt a deep responsibility to get that out there in some form, some artistic form, and we did that through Reckless Mercy. Well, so there's a long answer to your question.
That's a hell of a setup, though, man. I'll tell you what. Well, when you're making Reckless Mercy, there's obvious because for you it hits so close to home, but you're also making a piece of art. Were there any conflicts that you had internally with yourself of when to be not more real, but when to let the script breathe and be more personal for you, as opposed to taking liberties with the creativity for the benefit of the movie?
I would say,
because it's a hard balance, especially when for a story like that. It's a hard balance sometimes to strike.
I only let certain things out through different characters. Most of the characters in this film actually are saying something about me. So I just kind of saw like, what, who is this character? What am I trying to say through them? It's like, and what part of me will I allow them to have? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like even just like he's got an associate. He's another psychologist who's another drunk with him. He keeps talking about how he has father issues and stuff like that. And that's kind of like that mildly alluding to issues I've had with. And I had a great dad. He's just very quiet, just a man, like I said. And he would have driven stuff halfway across state for me to support me and stuff like that. Just not very communicative, And there are things I've always regretted in that regard. So I was like, so even that character even got like a little piece of me, but not overtly. And I just and I felt like Shannon, where Shannon was concerned, like I said, she's feeling everything and she's saying a lot of the things that I'm feeling. But it was important to me to respect the people who were in that room, who, like I said, who are still very angry, and who knows if they're ever going to find the ability to make peace with what they lived through. And I feel like one of the things that a lot of faith-based films get wrong is trying to tie everything up in a nice little neat bow by the end of the film. So with her, I left her open. By the end of the film, you don't know how she's ever going to deal with this. It's not like, oh, I've forgiven him too. It's like, nope. I want people who are still struggling with this pain and hurt, I said, to have somebody they can relate to. So by the end of the film, they can still relate to her, because who knows, she may never forgive the man.
Is there anything about this film that, creatively, in terms of how you approach the narrative, that in hindsight you wish you had done differently?
Oh,
Because it's such a personal film. I mean,
yeah.
we can, especially with a topic like this, the tendency for creative is like to ruminate over every other possibility of,
Uh-huh.
what could I have done differently, not just for the benefit of the film, but what I felt like maybe in hindsight would have been more authentic for me to approach it in that particular way. Was there any dichotomies that you struggle with, in terms of looking back on the film and how you approached it?
Not really.
No
Um,
regrets.
no, there are no regrets, and and sometimes I almost feel like I'm so honest to a fault. There's I feel like um, let me I'm trying to remember like what film it was that just really got me thinking. Like the films of James L. Brooks, the guy that did Terms of Endearment,
Hmm.
As Good as It Gets. Watching his films and just watching these characters just blurt things out, I'm like, oh my gosh, and I think that's kind of one of the things that stylistically set him apart, was that his characters were saying things aloud that most people would just think and would never let come out of their mouth. And I felt very inspired. I've been very inspired by him, and people like Alanis Morissette, who, when she's writing her songs, is like, oh my gosh, you're going to sing about that out loud, because she seems from the very deep hurt of the relationships that she's gone through in the past, and she just puts it out there for everybody. I'm like, just like she's naked.
Right.
And 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 in many type ways, I've said that I wished I could be as bold as Alanis Morissette, to be able to put myself out there. But I feel like this is probably the most I've ever put myself out in anything. And in some ways, it felt a little uncomfortable to do it, and especially after the premiere, because both of my kids were at the premiere, and the kids still have. Well, my son still has a very good relationship with his mom and
Mm.
everything, and I was just like, I asked him after the premiere, I'm like, buddy, I'm like, how do you feel I handled this? Do you think I went too far in like what I poured into this, and what I let out? And he said, Dad, no, I thought you did it in good taste. I'm like, okay, well,
Oh,
that
that's
was to
good.
me probably the most important feedback that I could have gotten, was from him saying that, or and my daughter too, just to knowing that they were comfortable with the subject matter, and that they felt that I'd handled it appropriately, because they both lived through it too, and I didn't, and it meant a lot to me that they respected the art.
Well, that's beautiful. I mean, yeah, that's a heavy one, man. That's a heavy. But the fact that what do you think you would have done if you didn't have a creative outlet to put this place to? Because at least creatives have a means of kind of expressing what's going on the inside by creating something that represents it.
Yeah.
You know, and so although creatives generally tend to be more sensitive to particular topics,
Hmm.
um, they at least have that balance and that outlet to be able to at least let some things go, or at least create something that helps them resolve what's going on the inside.
Hmm.
Um, what do you think you would have done if you didn't have filmmaking to do that?
I think it would have repressed it,
Hmm.
and I'm not saying that it would have ultimately destroyed me. I do think it has the potential to do that. It's like a cancer that can eat at you. Um, but I don't know that my quality of life would necessarily be as good as what it is.
Hmm.
Um, Again, I said the process of making it was hard. The aftermath of it was like, that felt so good to be able to get that out there. Um, and I feel like it was very healing. Again, it was almost like you've gone through some sort of wound or operation. Things didn't heal up, extremely well. Opening it up again, cleaning it out. Let's suture this up better. And it was very helpful in the long run.
Okay.
But a lot of good things that happen aren't necessarily fun or unpainful as you're going through them, but they're like even the bishop says that in the film. It's like a tonsillectomy. It's a good thing to have done, but it's like can be very painful,
Mm.
right?
Right, right, right. Well, now that you have this film that's, in a personal way monumental for you, and this is the most recent thing that you've done, and you're working on releasing it in some fashion, correct?
Yeah, we're trying
Okay,
to get it
so
on Amazon.
okay,
Yeah, but we're trying
and
to show it as many places as we can too.
sure, yeah, yeah. Where do you think you're gonna go from here now that that kind of in some way resolves a lot of things in terms of how you emotionally process it? Like now that you have a renewed ambition for filmmaking in the recent years, especially with the finishing this film that is essentially a capstone on your life experience.
Hmm.
Where are you hoping to take your career in the direction, and what type of project do you think is gonna give you that extra push?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to top this one. It's I keep telling people that this is my magnum opus. Um, and in terms of, and I understand, like as an artist, I do plan on growing, more and learning, how
We
to
just
shoot
can't help
film
it.
better, to write better and stuff. I said, but in terms of what I have to pour into a film, like this is the nuclear bomb that I had from my life. I said, I hope to goodness I never experience anything of equal or greater value to this to ever have to put into another film. Um, so in terms of the the immensity, the power of it, this was probably my magnum opus in terms of that. But I'm ready to do a comedy. I,
You
yeah,
probably
seriously,
after this, yeah, yeah.
yes. And yeah, I would just love to have a good laugh and just enjoy the next one. And we actually planning on, we want to do one that's set on during the lockdown of 2020,
Mm.
about a high schooler who's losing graduation, and just kind of lean into and not make fun of the pandemic per se, but maybe a lot of the things that we kind of did when we overreacted a bit,
A
ran out of
bit, just a
toilet
little bit.
paper. Yeah.
It's
um,
so funny looking back on COVID, because it was like it was one of those things. It's like it only it legitimately affected them in a way of like less than 1% of the population, and it was specific to a subset group of people. And the first thing that goes is toilet paper. Like, why is that a survival thing? You could in a survival situation, you just use a towel and wash it. Why toilet
exactly.
paper? Why are
Or a
you not
job, right?
getting canned food or something like that, or like stocking up on minerals and supplements or something like that if you really think it's going to go down? That's probably the funniest thing that came out of COVID was the toilet paper rush.
Yep. But yeah,
um,
that's kind of, yeah, that's where, and I do say this. I mean, again, they say write what you know. I've had people tell me before, it's because they know what my life has been like. They're like, why don't you make a film about yourself? I'm like, well, I'm always making a film about myself. I really am. I'm always pouring
Facts.
some aspect of things I've learned into it. And there's still a little catalog there to pull from other things. Um, but yeah, I'm just ready to just enjoy the ride and the next one, and just have some fun.
Okay,
Because I think we need a good laugh after how heavy this one was.
that's completely understandable. um, I want to backtrack for a second because I think this might be interesting. Is that you started writing the script in '09, right?
I'm sorry, which one?
You started writing the script in '09, correct?
For a story
For
for what?
for for okay. When did you start writing the script for Reckless Mercy? I might be getting my timelines mixed up.
Okay, so I started writing that in 1989. Again, there was an old version of
Oh,
this,
right,
and
right, right.
actually,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
change a whole, like the basis of it didn't change hardly at all. And the odd thing was, it was like it was sitting there ready to go. I mean, it was only partially written, but it was just like, oh my gosh, when we pulled this out, I'm like, we're definitely doing this because now I understand the whole concept of this now.
Now you have
Um,
that. You have the basis to actually flush it out from personal
yeah,
experience.
but the final draft of it was done by I'd say August of 23. Yeah, so we had it done
Okay.
like maybe about a year before.
What gave you the courage to put that sort of film that's so personal to you out on screen?
I've always, I don't know, I feel like when you live through things, especially like this, that it's important to, okay, because when it first happened, I'll say this, when it first happened and it went down, um, my experience over the next few years after losing her, was that most people did not want to bring her up. They didn't want to bring the situation up. They were afraid they were going to say the wrong thing. And it's like I just lived through this in silence largely. And I'm not saying that I didn't have people, I did have my close friends, my family, and everything like that. But in general, like even like at my church, most people just they never brought it up. It's like it never happened, and that was hard to deal with. And I feel like having lived through something like this, I want to be able to put that out there so that anybody else who's living through something similar has an outlet or can and see that somebody else understands this, and use it as a means to help other people.
Okay.
And it's like why live through something like this if you can't do something positive, in response to it,
So it's an act of giving, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's a hell of a story. I've had a couple stories on this podcast, but that one might be the emotional to date. But the fact that you did that though is really admirable. I gotta say, because when you put something that personal on the screen, it's like, there's when you're making the film, like even though you're aware of how much it means to you, you're also equally aware of the fact that there could be some blinders on when it comes to making the film, in terms of how you approach it, and just the fact that you're going to release it. So just the fact that you're able to do that at all, I think that's certainly something special, sir. So
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, with that being in mind, you're going to try to do a comedy, which that might be even better therapy. You never even know. Are there any final thoughts that you want to leave with the audience in hindsight of all of this, and what if they live through something like this, and how to use creativity to actually as an outlet for it?
Oh, it's hugely helpful to get it out. Even if, like, here's the thing, like I said, even writing the script was very therapeutic. Like, even if you don't intend on putting it out there for the world, it's good to just do something, to journal it, to write songs, even if you just keep it to yourself. It helps. It's very therapeutic. And hopefully you've got people that who will walk through it with you and share the experience with you. That's hugely important. I just wish that for anybody who's going through that, because again,
Right.
It's like, and I get that most people don't understand, they've not lived it, and one of the things I realized too, like the few people who would talk to me were older people, and I'm like, well, they lived in a day and age when polio, and the mortality rate was so much higher. It was more common to hear of children dying and people knowing of kids who've died and stuff like that. It's just, the medicine's so good now, and it's just not as common stuff. So I do feel like the society is maybe not as primed to have to deal with it, and which is a good thing. Thank goodness we don't have the sort of mortality rate we did, but
True.
It can make it complicated.
Well, Nathan, thank you for telling your story. That was moving. I wish you luck, especially moving forward now that you have this. Obviously, it'll never be quite behind you because it's such a personal part of your life. But now that you created something to be able to have an outlet to process and deal with that, and for other people to be able to experience that, I wish you luck. Where can people find your work at?
Right now, the previous 3 films are on Amazon Prime. A Story for Winter, Chasing Glamour, and The Name of the Sun. And you can also find The Name of the Sun on Tubi, and probably like a number of other, I don't know. But that's the one that in America that people will be able to find. Hopefully before long, Reckless Mercy will be on Amazon, but we're still waiting that out. So that can be a process, trying to get it on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Nathan, thank you for coming on the podcast. I certainly appreciate you coming, spending your time to be able to talk about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too.